Hi, and welcome to the Kindergarten Science Curriculum Preview for the fourth 6 weeks. Today we're going to talk about Unit 5, Cycles and Systems. As always, we're going to start off with our key planning documents. We're going to be referring to the pacing guide, the unit overview, and then just talking about the vocabulary on the clarifiers. So here's a screenshot of the pacing guide for the fourth 6 weeks, and you can see it's divided into 3 little mini units, starting off with a process skill, and it's K.2D. This 6 weeks, students are going to be doing lots and lots of observing and recording of observations as well as data. And so we want to take a few days at the beginning of the 6 weeks to practice that in several different ways. And we'll talk about that in just a few slides. Then we've got 8 days where we're going to be looking at weather changes from not only day to day, but also over the 4 seasons. So we'll have 8 days to focus on that. And then, of course, recording, observing and describing and recording on throughout the rest of the unit. And then we end up with 12 days where we have 2 leading standards together, and that's where we look at repeating patterns and then again spiraling back to seasons, and then day to day, so that ties in nicely with what they have just done, as well as looking at objects in the sky. And then we've got 3 verbs with K.8C, observe, describe, and illustrate. You'll notice on the right side that we have process skills that are integrated into the leading standards, and most of the lessons with AIMS and STEM scopes have those integrated in, but you'll notice that K.2D is partnered here as well as here, and so we want to make sure that we take some time at the beginning of the unit to help students be successful and be able to practice ways to record and organize their observations and data. So let's take a look at some resources for that. So I just want to remind you that with all process skills and including any tools that you're going to be using with your students, STEM Scopes has a teacher toolbox, and there's 2 sections I want to draw your attention to today. One is the process skill primer, and then the other one is the literacy links. Both of these have resources for, let me go back 1 slide, for K.2D. Remember, we've got 5 days devoted to that, so you may be wondering, where can I get some resources to help me plan those 5 days? So that's what I want to focus on right now. So I want to go ahead and show you what we've got in that teacher toolbox. So this is that resource for those 5 days. The first one I want to highlight is what's in the process skills primer, and that's in the teacher toolbox. And there's 2 sides of the primer. One side is a teacher side, and that's this text back here in the background. And this really helps teachers frame exactly what that means to record and organize data and observations at the kindergarten level. So it has it divided up into some information about how to do that with pictures, with numbers and words, which of course goes right with a standard that you can see at the top of the screen. The other side of the process skill primer is the student side, and that's where they have these activities that students can practice. These may or may not be connected with the content that you're currently teaching, and that's okay, because we're just practicing how to do this actual process skill, and then they'll be able to apply that once they get into the rest of the mini units. The first process skill primer little tryout has them use different kinds of plastic animals and looking at how many legs it has and some different information about that animal, and then recording it in a table, so practicing that. And I have an image there in the corner just to remind you, your science lab on campus just got 2 big tubs of plastic animals, lots of different kinds, that would be great to use with this practice. The second process skill primer, it's called Assessing Mastery. It's this one right here, and that just uses little cutouts of these robots here to do that. So you could use one, you could use both of those, but I just wanted to point that out. In addition, I took a look at another section there in the teacher toolbox, which I mentioned last 6 weeks in the curriculum preview, and that's called literacy. And there's a subtopic underneath there called linking literacy. It's for K through 2. So these are strategies that they have in there for when you read informational text with your students, different ways to organize this information and record. And so I thought this might be a really great way for us to take one of the strategies that they had there and see if we could tie it to this process skill. So one of the first strategies they had listed there is called the 3W chart: where, when, and why. And then you can see it gives you a step-by-step of how to do that particular strategy. What I did was I took that strategy and I just tweaked it a little bit to go along with the content. So if we're reading informational text, we could do it just like what it says there in the strategy, but then students could be able to take that same kind of chart and modify it when they get into looking at objects in the sky. So when they're reading, they would look at where, when, and why within the book. And then later on, when they did the content and they're actually observing those objects in the sky, they would be familiar with this table format, and they could draw a moon when they saw the moon and know that it comes out at night and day. Maybe they see a rainbow one day and be able to record that. So just an idea of how you can use the same type of organization, maybe with reading, and then you can apply that to their observations. And again, you can get to all of the strategies, and there are lots of them, in the STEMscopes Teacher Toolbox. It's called Literacy, and it's linking literacy. I'll go back to show you a screenshot of that. So it's right here in the Teacher Toolbox. There's literacy and there's the process skills primer. Another really great connection that you can make with that particular process skill is maybe incorporating an interactive word wall for science. These interactive word walls, most of them come from Dr. Julie Jackson's Facebook page, which is called Science Toolkit, and you'll see that in the corner there. These are some examples of kindergarten word walls that go along with the content for this particular 6 weeks. And if you look at them, they really are organizing observations and information. And so that goes along nicely with that process skill as well. So you could practice how you would use these maybe for those 5 days when you're introducing that process skill. Alternatively, you could use them when you get into the content as well. The picture at the top in the middle, that's outlined in red. I just want to give a shout out to Heather Beecraft. She sent this to me. She's a kindergarten teacher at Porter, and this was one of the strategies that she used a couple of 6 weeks ago for having her students interact with some objects when talking about properties of matter. But I started to think this would be a really great way for your students to practice the patterns when they look at the patterns, maybe in day or night, or some of the things that they see. You've got a nice little sequence here that students could sort cards or pictures or drawings that they make. And so I just wanted to put that idea out there. And thanks again, Heather, for sharing that with me so I can share it with everyone else. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the content. This is just the unit overview, and if you've listened to the curriculum previews before, I always point out the different function there so you can get the information that you need when you're ready to start your planning. We've got guiding questions, and then we have approaches to classroom use, and then resources that we're just going to briefly touch on for this 6 weeks. So the guiding questions are listed for students, and really by the end of the unit, students should be able to either show or answer these following questions with the vocabulary that we have for this particular unit. So these can guide your discussion, and then this can also be used as some of your formative and summative assessments as you move through the unit. The approaches to classroom use, I just have a section on there that talks about the process skills for this particular unit. So I will highlight some of the tools that are to be used for the units that we have in K.4a. One of the things that your students are going to be using for the first time is a demonstration thermometer, and just talks about how that works. You have those in the science lab as well as a windsock, and so just pointing those out and putting a visual there. And then just kind of giving you a breakdown of the key concepts for some of the content as well. So if you're a veteran kindergarten teacher, you may just want to glance over and make sure that you've incorporating all of the things that you've done in the past. And if you're new to kindergarten, you might find something new that you need to add in or that you hadn't thought about. The resources page at the end of the unit overview also has pretty detailed notes about what I think are good fits for a particular standard. So when you're ready to get pencil to paper and putting your plans down, this will save you some time so you can kind of go into the pieces of STEM scopes and look and see what might be best fits, as well as the Ames books that might be good fits for that particular standard as well. I also have some notes about EduSmart. And then if there are any Delta readers, and you'll see a screenshot there on the right side of the screen of some of those titles that fit in nicely, I highlighted those as well. If you're not familiar with those Delta readers, I wanted to go ahead and show you what they looked like. Here's a list of all of the titles for those Science Delta readers, and there should be 3 of these boxes that you see on the screen on your campus for your grade level to use, and each box contains all of those things that are listed. This is when we were packing those up at the warehouse, so I wanted you to have an idea of what they look like. If you're not aware of where those are, you might want to check with your librarian. They're usually housed there over the summer. Okay, want to kind of wrap up with just comparing kindergarten and first grade focus. The standards for kinder and first grade are very similar, so I always like to talk about what foundation you're laying for first grade and look at some differences. So you'll see 3 rows on this table, and each row highlights the content standards for this 6 weeks. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight the differences between the different standards for kinder and then for first. So when we look at the first row with weather, your students are really just observing and describing. They can record that as well to bring in that process skill, but really we want to talk about the differences between day-to-day weather and then over the seasons. That's your focus. You can see next year they're going to specifically record weather information, and they're going to start with some measurement. For K.8b, your students are to identify events that have repeating patterns, and there's a couple of examples there. Next year, they're going to identify the characteristics of the seasons of the year and day and night. So a slight difference there, so you're laying the foundation for looking for those patterns. And then finally, K.8c, where we're looking at objects in the sky. Kindergarten students observe, describe, and illustrate those objects in the sky, and then we've got some examples there. And then next year they're going to observe and then record the changes that happen over time. And then just a reminder about the vocabulary. If you're using STEM Scopes Picture Vocabulary, that's a great resource, but please just remember to check on the clarifier because STEM Scopes has some but not all of the terms. So here's one of the clarifiers for this unit standards. And so STEM Scopes would have some of these words but not all of them, and we want to make sure that we've got our students exposed to all of the words that really are going to set them up for success for understanding that concept. And so I know we showed this slide before, but since we're talking about vocabulary, I just wanted to remind you, if you're going to move forward with your interactive word wall, the vocabulary that you use on them should come from the clarifier, so that can help you with what the terms are. And if you haven't jumped into interactive word walls and you need just a quick overview and a step-by-step of how to get started, head on back into Canvas to the third 6 weeks. And in the just-in-time learning, I have a 15-minute video that I've laid it out step by step. So if you'd like to get started and do something similar to this with your students, then you can get started there. And as always, please share with me any successes that you have or examples like Heather did, and I'd love to share that out. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a very lovely 6 weeks. And always, please do not hesitate to contact me if I can help support your science program in any way. Thanks so much for joining me.